Hello, this is Mark Hillary, and this is just a short note before we go into this week's podcast to say that we'd originally recorded this episode for March 21st, 2024, and you'll hear me introduce that date at the beginning. It's going out on the 28th of March 2024 because we inserted the special Rod Jones birthday edition. Thanks. Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast for 21st of March 2024. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, back in Montreal, Mark. And boy, we have got an exciting topic today. And it's one that not only I think our guest is going to have a tremendous amount of information and insight around, but I'm also excited to talk about it because it's going to pertain to CCW, which took place a couple of weeks ago in Berlin. And our guest today is Chris Hague from yoummday. Now, I was excited when you told me that Chris was going to be on the show to talk a little bit about what he was picking up at CCW, because I was at CCW, and it'll be very interesting to compare notes in terms of what Chris was observing, what Chris was discussing with other delegates versus what I might have been picking up on too.
Yeah, and the discussion, for this podcast call with Chris, it really came out of CCW and what Chris was observing, because I saw him talking about the conference and he was kind of taking a big picture view and saying, really, what we all need to be talking about is what is the BPO or the contact center of the future? How is it going to look? How are we going to get past all these problems that we see all the time, focused on attrition, focused on retaining staff, focused on how do we create flexibility, and how do we attract people into the industry. And so he was sort of saying we need to sort of answer some of those questions. Of course, in his position, I guess he thinks that he has many of the answers, but I know that you were there at his presentation at CCW. So maybe it's a good idea to hear what you thought and what you heard from some of the people on the floor.
Look, at CCW in Berlin at the end of February, there's no two ways about it. There were tremendous concerns about how the industry is going to manage staffing. There was a lot of worry about the extent to which contact centers and individuals working in contact centers are not necessarily aligned with each other and the objectives that they might have from a career standpoint versus what the expectations of the employer are. Chris's presentation, I think, was very practical. It was very real world. It discussed a lot of these different elements. It discussed a lot of what's going on in the industry as it relates to these competing interests between the employee and the employer. And I think what was refreshing about Chris's presentation too, and the discussions that Chris and I had afterwards, is the extent to which his organization, yoummday, and the business model that they're proposing, this flexible work model or gig working model, as some people would put it, is really coming to the forefront. Mark, we're picking up more and more in our research at Ryan Strategic Advisory that the buying community is very interested in looking at new ways of CX delivery. The days of exclusively having agents in a contact center centralized in one of those big farms that we saw in the 1990s, we know that those days are over. We've talked about this on the podcast many times. But the reality too is, what do you replace it with? There are some organizations that are proposing that it's all going to be driven by AI and bots and automation. And to an extent, yes, there is application for that way of doing business in CX. But what I think is practical around what Chris and what yoummday are talking about, and a lot of other organizations that are picking up on the same way of doing CX, is the fact that flexibility is key. Being able to find the best agents with subject matter expertise and passion for brands is so important. And to my mind, that was one of the key takeaways I had from Chris's presentation at CCW, and also the openness of delegates across the ecosystem at CCW in Berlin to be willing to talk about this way of doing business.
Yeah, I think that the discussion around AI does come into this as well, because when we were in an environment where almost every customer problem went to an agent, then the very traditional kind of warehouse full of people answering calls, that was the paradigm. That's how it worked. And but it does seem that we're moving into an environment where a greater percentage of interactions will be handled automatically, will be handled by AI. We're not talking about the end of human contact altogether, but we are talking about elevating the human contact to the more kind of difficult interactions that require some troubleshooting. So it seems as if having a more specialized, flexible sort of environment fits this new model rather than the aircraft hangar. So that's certainly what Chris was describing in our conversation, and clearly it's what he was talking about at CCW. So why don't we go straight to the interview and hear from Chris himself?
Absolutely. It'll be nice to revisit some of the fond memories from CCW in Berlin. And just as an aside, Mark, I will say the best trade show in our industry that I've been to in the last 10 years.
Excellent, excellent. Well, hopefully we can all meet up there next year then.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, Chris, it's great to get you back. Now, I had a conversation with you on this podcast about 4 or 5 months ago, and that was really on how you saw the BPO industry shaping up in the 2020s. And I saw you recently wrote a blog that was along a similar sort of theme, but it was focused more on CX partners of the future. So if you are a company that's out there looking for a CX partner, then you were sort of saying that there's a lot of changes taking place in the industry at present, and companies have got a choice. They can do their CX internally, and a lot of companies still choose to do that. But if they are looking to find a partner, then what is it that you're sort of thinking of? What areas do you think are changing dramatically at the moment then compared to what we might have been talking about a decade ago?
So Mike, thanks for having me back on. I think I would probably shift a little bit from talking about the CX changes to what's actually impacting the world of work itself. And I would look at this macro view, because if we look at what's impacting the world of work, I think this then helps us focus on how companies can get ahead of this curve in terms of their CX delivery and how they can meet these challenges through some creative CX delivery. So those changes to the world of work are things like an aging workforce, shortage of skilled labor, AI, emerging generations wanting much more from their work-life balance, and then this idea of global interconnectedness. The world's gotten a lot smaller in the past 20 years, but I think it's getting even smaller still. And I think companies that can meet these challenges head on are really going to thrive. And especially for companies that want to outsource their CX and find new ways to do it, they need to come up with ways to combat, if you will, these 5 challenges impacting the world of work.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not so much that we're talking about CX as a service or as an industry that's changing, and more the kind of changes in the workforce itself. Because CX, we employ a lot of people. You've got a lot of people. The agent community often, they're not on great wages. Often it's a little bit more than minimum, but we're not talking about really highly paid people. But normally there's a lot of them, and we're starting to see people having different demands from their employer. And employers wanting more flexibility from people. I mean, I guess this is really what you're talking about, these kind of changes.
100%. And I think you've hit it, because it's not the CX that's just changing, it's the world around it that's changing. And so the world of CX has to catch up, and it has to catch up in such a way that it meets the needs of, let's say, the agent community, but it also does it in such a way that it still delivers, really strong ROI for clients, And what do clients want most of all? Great interactions with their customers. So that's why I think those things I listed they're happening around us, they're happening now. And it's about how companies can meet those challenges. So if I give one example, there's a lot of younger people entering the workforce, Mark, and you and I are a Generation X. We probably have maybe less expectations than people coming into the workforce, but you've got Gen Y and Gen Z coming in, and really they don't want to go to an office to a job that they're not particularly happy with and sit behind a desk for 8-9 hours a day. So I think the world of work has to really engage them and pivot to their expectations. And when I first started thinking about this, I thought, wow, they're really entitled. But I think that technology has changed so much since you and I were in our 20s. And why would we begrudge a generation the opportunity to maybe have a different way of working that gives a better work-life balance just because we didn't have it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that a lot of people might argue, and we see this kind of argument on LinkedIn all the time, that we're just seeing a lazy younger generation that expects to work fewer hours and doesn't want to come into the office. But is there a different way to look at this? I mean, the difference between like measuring inputs and outputs, for example. So we've always been used to the idea that you go to the office and do an 8-hour shift, and quite often you're paid either by the hour or you get a fixed salary. You get the same amount every month. Is it better to start thinking of work as more closely connected to outputs? What you actually do is what you get paid for.
100%. I mean, 100%. And let's look at the CX industry. There's a lot of people employed in the CX industry that work very hard and take the job very seriously, and they do a great job. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of people that probably turn up, do as little as they can, and then go home and get paid the same as someone who's far more productive. So where's the fairness here? And I think starting to look at incentivizing people on output is a much smarter way to do it. I mean, obviously that's the premise of what we do at yoummday with our variable pricing. And I think the industry really has to go this way. You incentivize these people that are working hard, that are keeping their promises, that are doing the right thing by customers. And you de-incentivize those people that aren't working as hard, that aren't doing the right thing, that are making a bit of a mockery of the job. Because CX is a great career. It's an important job, and it comes in all various shapes and sizes. But I don't think that we should be incentivizing people that aren't performing. This is just nuts. And here's the thing: there's a lot of companies that are outsourcing that at the end of the day paying for, let's say, unproductive labor, whereas unproductive labor alongside very productive people. I mean, this ROI can be fixed very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that in the traditional work environment, that's always been the case, where you're getting the same salary every month and you're in the office 9 to 5. The boss is measuring whether you're at the desk normally, not what widgets you're delivering per day or whatever. So I guess there's a different type of focus, and this kind of comes back to the concern a lot of managers had when we all went home during the pandemic. Many managers were saying, well, how do I manage people if I can't see them? Because they were kind of focused on being able to see people and see how many hours they're working and how much time they're at their desk, rather than actually just looking at the stats, of what each person is actually delivering. So I mean, this is quite a big cultural change, don't you think?
It is, and I think it takes a mind shift as well, because as you said, a lot of managers were concerned when people started working from home. So they put tools to make sure people were, in front of their computer. So are they moving their mouse? They take screenshot, they take a shot with their camera every 15 minutes or whatever. For me, this seems a little bit draconian. But pretty quick as a manager who's fulfilling their tasks, who's meeting their objectives, who's doing what they promise and who's not. I think any manager worth their salt within a team, they know who's a team player, they know who's performing at their best and who's not. So the concern's definitely justified. But at the same time, if you're a good manager, you know what's going on with around you and the people underneath you.
Yeah, and I mean, how do you attract talent then if the people feel, I'm going to be judged all the time on what I do day to day? What if I have a bad day, for example? Does that make it less attractive for people, or do you think that the fact that or that this kind of environment attracts the kind of people that enjoy what they do and basically are going to be able to achieve more than average anyway?
So very good point. And how we tackle this at yoummday is that our freelance talents, what a traditional BPO would call an agent, they get to choose the company they work for, where they work from, and when they work. So I think when you give people such a level of choice in their working life, this is a natural motivator for them to succeed. It makes them happy. The choices are all on them that they've made. And so for me, this is a real game changer. If you empower people like this, on their terms, they're going to want to work. Whereas a traditional CX agent, they're told when they're going to work, who they're going to work for, and where they work from. Now, if it's my business that I'm outsourcing to, I want the happiest people looking after my customers. I want the most satisfied people looking after my customers because I know those people are going to care about what they do, and I know they're going to work to deliver what's needed. And then when you couple that with performance-based pricing, I really believe it's a winning combination because you've got happy people doing a job they like with a brand that they're passionate about, and they're incentivized to do it. And in the yoummday case, they're incentivized at a much greater rate than they would for a traditional call center. And you could even say that in a traditional model, the people that are high performers are almost subsidizing the low performers. So how is that fair?
Yeah. Well, I think this comes back to the point you made right at the start that we're actually talking about a change in work rather than just a change in how contact centers are organized. Because what are the most common reasons that people quit? Either they hate their boss, or they don't feel they've got any control over their working life. That they can't control their hours, they have no flexibility, or these are always like the most commonly cited problems. And so what you're saying, if I understand it, then is you've got agents that choose the time they're working, that choose the account they're going to work for. So they'll stay at home. So they choose their location.
Yep.
They choose the hours they're working, and they choose the brands that they're working with. So, if you're not at all interested in banking, you're not going to be working for a bank on customer service. You can work for a fashion company instead then, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. And I really see this as the way forward for really engaging people and improving their happiness. And we talk a lot about happiness at yoummday because we know if our talents are happy, we know that our clients' customers are going to be happy. It's a very simple equation. And you and I have both been around the industry for a long time now. We've you see a lot of unhappy agents that are always skiving off, or trying to get out of work, or just want to hit their baseline target, just hit their baseline target just enough to keep the job for another month, for example. At yoummday we've got several drivers of performance now. Obviously, we're a technology company, so we pass those savings not only onto our clients, but we also invested in paying our talents more than they would on a variable pricing model compared to a traditional call center. But there's other incentives. The highest performers get to choose the best shifts. So let's say there's a sales project, and most of the sales come through between, say, 5 and 8 in the evening, for example. Then those shifts are open up to the top performers, and they're rewarded. So not only do they earn more anyway, but they would earn even more because they get to choose the best shifts. So there's also, I guess, some other layers of incentive there under our model. And if people aren't performing, then they're not going to stay around because they just don't have that earning potential.
Yeah. Yeah. But what's interesting, though, is that this kind of model has to be work from home, doesn't it? Because, in a traditional kind of work environment, whether it's CX or any other kind of office-based professional job, you put an office, you put it in a city center, and you're expecting enough people with the right skills to be within a few miles or kilometers of that office, within commuting distance. They need to be there so that they can come into the office every day. And what you're basically saying is, we can just get people and put them in a pool of labor, and they can be based anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And this really addresses the skills shortage, first of all. And it means that companies don't just have to look in their backyard for great people. They can find great people all over the world. So, there's great German speakers, obviously, in Germany, but there's also great German speakers in Turkey, for example. And they also now have the same opportunities to work as other German speakers within Europe. So it really opens the world up. Technology has opened the world up, and giving companies now the option for access to a global talent pool. So you don't have to just pick the best from your backyard. You can pick the best, from all over the world. And, at the end of the day, don't you want the best people working for your company? I mean, it's if you don't, then you need to look at your business model or how you approach it. And this comes back to this idea of interconnectedness, that companies can now start to look further afield, and they don't have to be bound by any talent shortages or skills shortages. With remote working, they have a far greater reach than ever before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this also addresses the talent shortage. I mean, there's a couple of ways I can see immediately. And first is the geography. So not being bound by geography, being able to hire from anywhere. I mean, I'm from the UK, and the UK. That just about everything, all the skills and industry kind of is focused around the southeast, all around London. If you go off to places like Cornwall down in the southwest, then there's no jobs available. And so that affects the entire local economy of the area. But if jobs are not geographically bound, then you can sort of like shift the dial there. You can completely change the makeup of different areas, but which is also great for the company that's searching for people.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring up this idea of searching, because as you just said, there might be a shortage of jobs there. Well, if there's a shortage of labor, and if there's a shortage of labor, that means companies are paying a lot more to search for people and to get them on board. And we both know how much companies pay to attract good people. And even an entry-level CX agent, it could cost a couple of €1,000 to get them, into the business. So
Yeah.
that competition for labor pushes up recruitment costs. And then the worst thing you want is to bring them into a business where they're not happy, because they're just going to churn and that high cost is just going to be repeated over and over again. I mean, why would you do this to yourself?
Well,
So
doesn't that come back to the attrition, the cost of attrition? I mean, we see horrendously high attrition within most BPO and CX environments, and I don't know if you've got any stats off the top of your head, or maybe you know roughly, but if you're in an environment where the agents are, choosing their hours and choosing the clients they want to work with, I would assume that the attrition is much lower than someone who joins a BPO and is then just told, okay, tomorrow you're working on this account selling mortgages.
yeah, so by our calculations, yoummday has a greater than 30% percentage point reduction in churn amongst our talents compared to traditional agents. And this is absolutely massive. So Mark, if I can use an example just from today, I'm currently in Berlin for the ITB conference, which is one of the biggest travel conferences in the world. It's massive. And a gentleman came up to yoummday's booth and he was extremely emphatic. He said, I have a call center in India and I'm so sick of my agents churning. He said, I get them in, I train them up. As soon as there's a better offer, even marginally better offer, they're out the door. He said, I'm absolutely sick of it and I'm not putting up with it any longer. So he's looking to move his call center operations to a different location. And obviously we were talking to him about the yoummday model, and our churn rate was something that really got his attention because it's a massive problem. And it's not just the cost of hiring people, it's the training, it's everything that goes along with it. It's an absolute nightmare. And again, it comes back down to the fact that if people are happy, they're going to stay and they're going to work hard and they're going to perform. So it's a really simple equation, but the world of work is changing, and we talk about this a lot. And the CX industry needs to catch up, and it needs to catch up in a meaningful way and quickly. Obviously, AI is all around us, and we've spoken before about AI coming in. Everyone knows it's going to replace the easy stuff, and now we can see the implementation more and more. And I think this is even going to increase the competition for top talent. So I think, and it's going to increase the competition for creative people and people that can come up with process improvements, etc.
Okay, so I wanted to make a point there based on something you were saying, and that's that the solution is not geographic. Now, if I go to any kind of CX conference, I will always see somebody from Poland stand up and say, come to Poland for your BPO. We've got the best people. Then there'll be somebody from Kenya that stands up and says, come to Kenya. We've got the best educated people, the best contact centers. Then there'll be somebody from Egypt. And, what you're saying is it really doesn't matter where you go. It's got nothing to do with geography. And it's much more to do with, are your agents actually happy and comfortable with the hours they're working, the clients they're working for? Because you're going to get the same kind of attrition problem in Poland as you are in Kenya.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're still, to some extent, putting a square peg in a round hole. You're still not giving people that flexibility and that choice. So it's the same issue everywhere. And this is why, most call centers have a similar attrition rate all around the world. And it doesn't have to be a problem. We have the technology now for remote working. We have the technology to give people more choice, and we have the technology to pay them more than they would ordinarily. So all these things combined improve the customer experience for clients all over the world. It's a no-brainer.
This flexibility, then, I'm assuming that it also opens you up to people that can't commute and can't spend 8 or 9 hours a day in an office. There must be a whole vast seam of talent that can only work half a day each day, or has caring responsibilities or children and needs to block out certain time when they can't be available.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. What I think we have in terms of remote work and allowing people to work remotely, and this idea of starting to bring more flexibility into CX work is that more people can do it on their own terms. And at yoummday, we talk a lot about bringing meaningful work to the people of the world. And this is one of the reasons why our founder, Klaus Harris, started the business. He had this, he really had a high level thinking about this. And, Mark, we know there's people that may have mobility issues. Well, they can now work for, let's say, a global airline brand from the comfort of their home, no matter where they are in the world, as long as they have a computer and internet connection. We have a lot of working parents at yoummday. You know, ordinarily a lot of companies might not want to hire working parents, but for us it's great if they can give us 10, 20 hours a week on their terms. Wonderful. So I think for people that may be less able to, for working parents, a lot of mature people that may have left the workforce but still want to contribute, still want to do something with their time that's meaningful and maybe earn a little bit more to supplement their income. yoummday's perfect for it. So this idea of flexibility, we have the technology to do it. So why not do it in a meaningful way that benefits, let's say, the workers, traditional agents, for example, as well as the clients, and with technology, the clients pay less, so it's a really difficult sell because, yoummday is at the forefront of this sort of forefront of meeting this revolution that's coming to the world of work head on. And when we talk to potential prospects that, hey, it's a win-win-win situation, quite often we're met with a blank stare, like, it's not possible, and it's a bit of a challenge to overcome. Now, it's not a horrible challenge to have, but it really is one that we need to explain over and over again, that using technology, it can be a win-win-win for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think that, as we're sort of wrapping up this conversation, we started by talking about the CX partner of the future and what it might look like if you're looking for a partner in CX. But it seems to me that what you're talking about is all professional work is essentially changing, and CX is just one component of this. So many office-based professionals will want more freedom around their hours and their working location. And you either kind of get on board with this, or you're kind of left behind with the people. You can only employ the people who haven't got a choice on where they're going to work, really.
That's a really nice way to put it, actually. You only end up hiring the people that don't have a choice. And where's that going to leave your company at the end of the day? I can tell you, the productivity is going to be low, the morale is going to be low. That's going to start impacting any sort of NPS scoring that you're doing with customers, and that's going to obviously reduce the turnover or the profitability of the company. And if it's a listed, it's going to reduce the share price.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be really human centric with our thinking, and we have the advantage now that with AI we can supplement that, so that workforces can be even more productive than before, and people can be hired to do more of what they are hired to do. This high level thinking, give people more time to do that and bring those benefits into a company. Let AI take care of the easy stuff, as we all talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, maybe that's a final point then, because you were saying that you think the higher level talent will become harder to find, and maybe there'll be higher remuneration. So it sounds almost as if the AI is handling the easy kind of customer interactions, then the human to human, customer to brand, where you're talking to a human agent, it's going to be the more complex kind of questions, more sort of troubleshooting. So, that really raises the profile of the agents. I mean, we're no longer just sort of handling the same problems over and over again. you're out there doing tough support questions that might be different day after day. So you need really smart people.
Yeah, and absolutely, because you want to be able to trust and empower these people to make decisions in your company. You don't want them having to run to one, two, three other people to make a decision, you know. You want to give them the power to do that and to do it quickly and with the best tools at their disposal so they can make the right decisions. So I think you're absolutely right. And I'm really interested to see. Um, I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when. And especially in the CX industry, other companies are going to start to cotton on to what it takes to keep people happy, and then give better customer interactions. Because, I think yoummday's at the forefront. Now, I'm not naive enough to think we're the only company doing this, but we've definitely got a good head start. And it's a matter now of education. And when companies see the results of a freelancer CX model, I think they're going to start demanding it. And especially with variable pricing, 70% of people buying outsourcing services are not on a variable pricing model. Like, this is crazy to me. You know, the talent is there. And I mean, they're getting ripped off at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
They're paying for services. They're paying for things that don't impact their bottom line and don't bring them ROI.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you can look at that from both sides, because what you're saying from the client side, they should be able to get more productivity and more value out of paying for the outputs, paying for each time a customer is helped, rather than just paying for somebody to sit there, for an hour, whether they're busy or not.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, there's all of the flexibility we've talked about for the agents, the fact that they choose when they work, and all these other kind of factors, actually makes it much more flexible for them. I guess the skill is kind of plugging them together, the platform in the middle that connects all this pool of agents with a client. And you must have predicted hours when the client is going to be busy, and the type of volumes they're expecting. So that I suppose is the kind of secret sauce in the middle there, being able to find the right number of people to be online at a certain time.
Yeah, true. But there's also levers you can pull. I mean, if you're on a variable pricing model, you can with a simple push notification incentivize people, to jump on and take some work if there's a spike in calls, for example. So this is just one lever you can pull. But these are not insurmountable problems. They just take a little bit of tech, and the right tools. So I think you mentioned one thing, Mark, and that's, we talked about variable pricing. If you've got agents on an hourly rate, it's a different mindset, because they get paid no matter what. Whereas if you've got agents on variable pricing, they want to work. If agents on an hourly rate, they're not going to be beating your door down if the phones go down, or if the telephony system goes down. If you've got variable pricing agents say, hey, what's going on? We want to work, otherwise we're not earning. Let's go. You would never see that in a traditional call center. If the telephone system goes down, everyone's going for a coffee, for a cigarette, having a chat to their mate, racing chairs down the hallway. So this, I think, is it's a complete 180 in terms of agent motivation that you can bring in with a freelancer CX model.
Yeah. I follow a podcast called Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, which Bruce Daisley, who used to run Twitter in Europe, that he writes. Now he writes books about productivity and business, and he's got this podcast. And I think that this kind of thing would be interesting to his audience as well, because what we're talking about is a complete 180 on how we work. You know,
Yes.
we've worked for so long in the office environment, paid by the hour for being there. And where has this come from? You know, I mean, where has the 8 hour day come from? It's, you know, essentially it's come from factories. You know, so because we used to sort of get up in the morning and go to work in the factory and finish as the sun was going down, that's kind of the tradition we brought into office culture, and it doesn't fit for many industries. But to start changing it, I mean, you said yourself that it feels sometimes like you're at the vanguard. You know, you're coming up with ideas about how work should function, and there's still a lot of people out there that just don't understand it. But I think that certainly, if you look at the kind of academic future of work community, this is where it's going. This is what people are talking about.
Yeah. So here's an interesting set for you, Mark, and hopefully I haven't told you this before, so you don't guess it straight off the bat. But when we do the per minute pricing for our freelance talents at yoummday, we base it on them getting paid double what they would per minute in a traditional call center. So that means if a yoummday talent works 40 hours a week, they get double. But have a guess what happens, and have a guess what talents choose to work in terms of number of hours per week. Do you think they work the full 40 to get the double pay, or what do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, immediately I would have guessed that people just work and work and work. You know, cost of living crisis, they'll work more and put more hours in. But I'm guessing from the smile I can see that they work fewer hours and earn exactly what they would have earned in a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see our talents working, you know, let's say 20 hours, 25 hours a week, you know, which was surprising to me, because when I first joined the business, I thought, okay, people are going to work the 40 hours, they're going to get paid double, no worries. But there's a real shift, and this is all due to technology, that people can now have a much better work-life balance. So we see our talents, I think, working about 25 hours a week or so, and getting paid the same, a little bit more than they would for a 40-hour week in a traditional center. But the good thing here, and any company can take advantage of this model, this is a reality, because, you know, let's say people that treat yoummday as their primary source of income, which 90% of our talents do. If there is a spike in calls for, say, an airline or a telco, then it's very easy to, you know, incentivize people or send them some sort of push notification to get them on the phones for an extra 2 or 3 hours, and they're happy to do it. So it's really easy for a business like ours to ramp up. Traditional call center doesn't have that, you know, that sort of flexibility. And you know, the more time I spend looking at this freelancer CX model and looking at where the industry is going with it, you know, supported by AI, it's got to leave traditional call centers for dead. I'm sorry. So I'm really interested to see how the whole industry will change, because let's face it, Mark, the poor old agent hasn't really had any innovation or change since the start of the industry. And I think this is a really wonderful way to empower people. And, you know, obviously the CX delivery is much better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Really, you're describing complete innovation in the way that the agent role is described and actually functions, but also it innovates from the sense that the client gets a lot more productivity out of the agents that they're working with. So I think that, you know, we're seeing flexibility from both sides.
100%. And the customer's the winner at the end of the day, let's face it. And that's what clients care about, that their customers are cared for by happy, engaged people that care, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Chris, that's fantastic. Thanks very much. Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Hague at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week. we can delete that last bit.